All right, everybody, good morning. I am out here in northwest Georgia. This is my bog, and this bog is typically about like it is right now with the water levels about 11 months out of the year. There's maybe 2 weeks to a month that things will dry up enough and all sorts of crazy grasses and sedges and stuff will pop out, and it's a pretty exotic and beautiful place out here. But I'm showing you this bog because I was instructed by my new 12-year-old habitat friends over at Coosa Ecological Services that we need to get more content out here for you folks to keep learning from. And that's what the young folk are about, is content, content, content. Unfortunately, being old like I am, I don't really want to show y'all my face on a selfie camera all day long. So this is my attempt to go ahead and say hello. My wife will ask me when I come to the farm, when you coming home? And I will tell her after dark, and she will tell me, ask me what day, and I'll tell her yes, because honestly, when I come to the farm, I don't always know what day I'm going to be getting to come home. So I'm out here early this morning. It's foggy here in northwest Georgia. I'm just trying to get a couple of videos shot for you guys. I wanted to show you some about planting bars and planting some bare root trees today. Okay guys, these here are called dibble bars or planting bars. I've got two different types here. In my opinion, these are the fastest way to plant any bare root trees. I really like the one to the right here. I'll start with it. I like it because it's got the foot pegs on both sides of the dibble bar, and if you look at it, it's actually thicker, so when it goes down on the ground it opens up a little bit wider hole, but you can actually get up on this thing and jump with both feet to get it down into the soil. So if you're planting anything bare root that has a little bit larger root system on it and you need a little more space in the soil to get it in, that's a great option. I like this dibble bar too. I think it's better for wet soils, or really for sandy soils, especially if you've got like a bare root loblolly pine tree or something that's just basically a tap root and you don't need a big hole. You've only got one side to get on it here to get it into the ground, so I really need some softer ground to not be worn out when I use this. A lot of the times we'll just jab them in because it's soft enough and you don't even have to step on them. But as you can see, it's a lot thinner, which is good if you just have a single tap root that you're trying to get in the ground, because when you're planting, as I'll show you in a bit, it's way easier to get the ground to close up than it is when you've opened up a larger hole like this dibble bar here. A two-man auger, which I used it yesterday some, and it'll kick your butt when you're a one-man with a two-man auger. But the auger on it is about the perfect size for a 1 gallon plant. So if you've got a ton of 1 gallon plants that have to be done, it's really hard to beat one of these simple augers. Even with some of the bare root trees that have big root balls, if you don't feel like you want to root prune them all, this did work really well for some yesterday, primarily because of this tip. So that tip goes down deeper than the rest of the auger, so that main tap root can slide on down in the hole and be centered up, and then you get a little more girth out of these blades here on the auger to get the rest of the root system in. So not a terrible option for 1 gallon plants or bigger bare root plants. If you've got a large number of them. All right, guys, this is an attachment that goes on my Ditch Witch SK900 or SK800. They're mini loaders. You stand on the back, you can rent them. But this attachment here is an auger, and it might be a little bit overkill for everyday, use. But if you got a plant, several hundred 3 gallon plants, this is what you want. You can run through them. I typically dig about 6 inches to a foot deeper than what the plant's going to require, especially if it's something like a persimmon that has a long taproot. That way we can throw some soil back in the bottom of the hole, and that taproot has something to take off in. So these are one of my Chickasaw plum plantings that we got accomplished here. This particular area I'm in right now, I used an auger to plant these trees because they had big bare root balls on them. After 100 of these planted with the auger, I decided quickly that we needed to move on to a dibble bar because the auger was just kicking my butt. It's too slow. But I bet you I will have a better success rate with these trees that are planted in the auger. So I planted these Chickasaw plums way too close together. I did that intentionally. They're actually, through the EQIP program, set up as a shrub. I did a shrub planting. Now, just to let y'all in on some of that, when you do a shrub planting, it doesn't pay even a quarter of the amount that a hardwood planting is. So don't make that mistake. If you can get 4 acres of hardwood planting instead of 4 acres of shrubs, you're going to do a lot better financially on the deal. But these Chickasaw plums are put together intentionally by me tight like this. I want it to become a thicket, a nice thicket full of shrubs. I've got some decent sun in here where we thinned out these loblollies. And it's a little bit thick here. I got a little bit more still to do, but there were so many hardwoods in there that had to come out. I've also put in the secondary little fire break right here, and the reason being is eventually I will run fire into these Chickasaw plums when they're mature, but I want them to mature first. A Chickasaw plum can handle fire as long as it's low intensity. If you burn them too hot, basically what'll happen is it'll set them back about 5 years in growth, and I don't really want to do that. So I've got a fire break on both sides here. On the other side over here is longleaf pines. This other side of this fire break. So we've got the fire break here, longleaf pines on the left, Chickasaw plums all the way down the middle where we thinned out the edges of this stand, and a secondary fire break so that I can continue to burn these loblollies on the other side. Okay, I just went ahead and pulled out one of these Chickasaw plums that we planted over here. It actually had already, some of the roots broke when I pulled it out of the ground, but I wanted to kind of give you an idea how this dibble bar worked. So there's my bare root tree here. There's your dibble bar. You can pick out your spot to plant. Get on your dibble bar. You got to use 2 feet. All right, get it down in the soil. You can open it up just a little bit if you need to. Pull that out. Take your bare root tree. Get your roots down inside. Sometimes you gotta tuck a few. And you want to come to it. I like my heel. Smashes better. A lot of guys just use their foot like that. But what you want to do is close that gap up. And then I always tug on it a little bit. I want to make sure that it's in there. There's not a big air gap. If you leave a big air gap down in your plantings on any plant, they can freeze, get water down there, freeze around the roots. The air in there can freeze the roots up, or it can dry them out, you know, if there's no water. So you really want to try to get those roots as insulated in the soil as you possibly can. Okay, so what you're looking at here is one of, I think, about 50 or 75 honey locusts that we planted. We planted these honey locusts along this firebreak property line right here. Runs all the way up the length of my property, and I did it for a few reasons. First and foremost is wildlife. The deer here tend to move down into ag fields and out of these mountains in January, February right now. We got a few that stay and will hang out here, but for the most part, they large majority of the herd moves down to where there's more food in the fields because there's nothing here for them to eat. Now, the cool thing about a honey locust tree is once they get big and start producing those black pods, Those pods are packed with protein. Not only are they packed with protein, but they drop in January and February, and everything eats those things. So it's a great source of protein and vitamins for our deer, and also all the other wildlife that eats them, you know, in a time of year when nothing else is here for them. So if I can get 50 to 75 of these guys along this property line producing those black pods, we'll hold more deer throughout the year, and more wildlife in general will benefit from it. The other thing about these honey locusts, they get some pretty nasty big thorns on them. I planted them far enough back from my break to where hopefully we're not dealing with them on the fire break. You want to be careful about tractor tires and things like that. Also look up your area, because some places honey locusts are extremely invasive. Here the black locusts are a little more invasive than the honey locust, but in some areas it's just the opposite. In some areas they can become a real problem for folks. Okay, let's talk about pawpaws. Something interesting I learned about pawpaw trees is that they use them in mine reclamation. Also, in some parts of the country, these things have grown almost like a sweet gum would here in Georgia. And what that means is they are an under canopy species that can live underneath these giant hardwood trees like this. Now the concern here in Georgia is that if we exclude fire from these oak trees for too long, all the sweet gums and maples that are in here will eventually take this canopy, because the little young hardwood hickories and oaks that are in here with no sunlight won't survive. So a closed canopy situation like this will be overwhelmed eventually by maples and sweet gums, and you'll lose all your oak saplings, which is why they are fire dependent. Now, in some places they're concerned about that as well with the pawpaw, that the pawpaw is going to be the tree that's going to take the canopy where they live, which is interesting. The other thing is, I typically wouldn't plant a pawpaw out of these, you know, moist, wet areas like this. They like these low-lying areas, native wise, but they plant them for reclamation to hold soil together, like on these hills. And also in these areas where they've become really invasive, they're actually starting to grow up in the tops of hills. I'm just not worried about them becoming invasive here. I used to see a lot of pawpaws when I was a kid. I hardly ever see them when I'm out hunting in different areas now. Every now and then I'll run across one, but I used to see a lot of them. So we planted about 350 of them. You can see I got them up the side of both sides of the road just to hold the soil together. Now this isn't the only area I planted them. I'm going to show you a more native setting for those pawpaws in just a second. Okay, we're coming down here to one of my little more native looking pawpaw patches. Check out all the blueberry growing through here. I love it down in here. We got some big sparkle berries growing all down through this bottom. And some monster pine trees. They love, these loblollies love this wet soil down here. But this area, I came in a few years ago, we thinned it out. I put about 1,000 culms of river cane down in this area. But at the time, a lot of the center of this area, where all this cane is taken off, this native river cane, it was actually, this whole middle section through here was underwater. So you can see where I planted around the edges of the water with the river cane. So we came back in here yesterday. It was great planting, nice, easy, soft soil, but see these little pawpaw trees here. This is a more native habitat for the pawpaw trees. They like these under canopy areas down here in this wet soil. And I imagine these are going to take off pretty good down in this hole down here. My goal for this area is this whole center section where you're seeing all these little flags will be pawpaw trees and tight cluster down here producing fruit and cover and pawpaws and holding the soil together down here. And then the whole exterior of it, all the way around both sides, is going to be a native river cane patch. And the river cane loves fire. The pawpaw does not like fire. So if the pawpaws do ever take off and get really invasive down here, we just simply cut a fire break around the areas of pawpaws we want to keep. And then I'll run fire all the way around the outskirts, which I think it's going to be coming sooner rather than later, because I got a lot of blueberries and stuff down through here, and I need to start opening these up. I thinned this once, but it's going to need to be thinned again. But this is a little more native pawpaw area for you. So this is one of our montane longleaf pines that we're going to show you the planting guys planting with their Ho Daddy slings or pickaxes in this video. But I just wanted to point out that these grassling stage longleaf pines spend the first 2 years, really up to possibly 3, just dropping roots down in the soil. It's got one really long taproot. It'll shoot down at least 3 foot or so before this thing starts putting out growth from the terminal bud that's in the top. They call that the candle. So when we burn this thing right now, if we burned it, which this is a disturbed spot, there's no fuel here, this thing curls up like that, protects that. It can burn all this longleaf pine straw completely away, and that terminal bud will be just fine. Now, once that bud gets out and up into this area, they call that the rocket stage. You run fire through during the rocket stage, and there's no longleaf pine straw to curl up around that guy, you can kill your trees. So that's why they say don't burn during the rocket stage. But for planting purposes, they always plant these things high. You can see I got about 1 inch of that pot sticking up out of the ground. I've got some other ones out here that only the bottom of the pot. You know, I got 3-4 inches sticking out. The reason for that is the survival rate is way better on these guys, you know, when they're planted up high like that. They just do better because that taproot can get down into the soil, you know, so everything's not quite this bare. But yep, so plant them a little bit high. The other thing about a longleaf, at least a montane longleaf here, we always try to plant container plants if we can, little small containers. You don't want to J-root these pine trees. When you got a taproot like that goes straight down in the majority of the tree root system, you really don't want to J-root them, and it's a lot harder for your planters to J-root a potted pine. You know, a bare root pine can get J-rooted pretty easily if you're not watching the guys. Hot diggity dog. I think my pollinator seeds are going to be okay. We had that hard freeze, a little bit of snow. Had a bunch of big rains last night. Just bumped a second flock of turkey for the weekend here. Eating my feed wheat instead of my native seeds out here. So I think we're going to be okay with this stuff. I hope so, but sun's up this morning. Burning the fog off of these mountains. What a gorgeous morning we got out here. It's so hard to go home. Well, not really. I got to get out of here, y'all. This is the end of my video. I've got a beautiful wife and 3 teenage boys at the house right now raising Cain, and I'm ready for a hot meal. Thanks, y'all, for watching.